Some last remarks I have about this include how that cop handled the situation. So first, the only thing he said was that he couldn't do much but file the report. When I said to him, if that's the case, then it looks like the bad guys won. And he said, for now. So with that comment, the cop acknowledged that based on my report and everything I had as far as proof goes, by his response, he basically admitted that he also thought, or he knew, that Steve Hagen was bad. So I think that that cop left out a very important question for me. And that is, do you want to press charges or attempt to sue the New Fairfield school system for pain and suffering and negligence of the managers and the directors over there? But what they acted like is exactly how they are trained when someone comes forward to report some of these abuses. And they're all trained to act like the person reporting this are crazy, like the person reporting this is somehow to blame. And I think that the U.S. military that is involved in these programs like MK Ultra, where they practice mind control, torture, child abuse, drug dealing, ritual abuse, and they do all these things that basically turn everybody into a weird cult, where they figure out who will go along with these abuses and who will in turn abuse others, and who doesn't like it and who will stand up to them and therefore become a target because they are not one of them. They have learned by doing this over and over and over again that if someone comes forward, this little cult, this little military cult, this little secret society is all taught to band together. And there is strength in that union. There is strength in those numbers. And they're all taught to say that the person that is saying that these people are a little bit weird, or these people are doing things that are crazy, or these people are doing things that are illegal or are wrong, whoever is coming forward against their little group, they are the crazy one. They are the one that should be blamed. They're the one who's causing all the trouble. Nobody else is having any trouble. Only the big mouth over there is having all the problems. None of them are having any problems with anything. So it must be something wrong with them. They must be crazy. They must be making it up. And that's the attitude that they all have. It's just pointless to even try to stand up against them. Because when you go in front of your boss, they'll side with this weird group. If you go to the cops will tell you they can't do anything at all about it. Because just maybe the cops are also involved with this military group. So no matter what you do, you were just going against the group. And it's not the group that is crazy. It's not the military that is crazy. It is not the secret societies that are crazy. It must be you who's having all these problems, who is crazy. That is why this U.S. military corporate machine that has taken over the United States of America has gone to such an extreme to take over all the media. That was their number one target. Put all the little publications out of business and take over all the newspapers and all the TV stations. Because the only thing that these sadistic criminals want you to hear is their own reports so that they could lie to you about everything and create a false reality. That's the only way that they can succeed, is to lie about everything that they do. So the only choice that people have is to try to get the proof yourself. When you see something, you better act on it. You better have your camera handy to take video of that right then and there, because that won't be there for too long. You better document what people say and keep some sort of record of that, because after a few years, You are not going to remember all these details. So this in New Fairfield all happened in the year 2007. And I would not remember all these details unless I kept all these letters that I wrote, like the statement that I made to the cops. I kept it with a few of these medical reports in a file. And I kept video of all these hives and welts that appeared all over my back, my neck, my arms, and my legs, and my face. So by getting all of that, and then producing a professional report, that is the only defense that you have. And that is worse for them than bringing them to court. Because once again, in today's age, it is all going to be kept very quiet. And I doubt that you'll get any media coverage at all. So that is what they're afraid of. People returning to their basic constitutional rights. Freedom of speech. Freedom of press. That is what these military dictatorships and these secret societies like the Freemasons and the Oddfellows and the Shriners have gone after all along. They have always hated American freedom and American constitutional rights. So the only choice that you have is to try to come forward yourself. And the last comment that I would like to make, in case people did not notice this, is concerning Jane Harwood, my stepmother. So Jane had a long career since she was first out of college in her early 20s, teaching elementary school, and then going on to be a principal. So she had something like 30 years of experience teaching school and managing schools as a principal. So after meeting my father, they let her go from the Darien school system, and I think they said due to budget cuts or something like that. And then they engineered a job for her in the New Fairfield school system that I think everybody may begin to realize are not the best people. So Jane never had any psychological issues until the end of her time working for the New Fairfield school system. And once again, I think that she worked there for about 6 years. So everything went fine until she started to report that these people around her, I guess teachers and other staff members in the New Fairfield Elementary School, began to watch her critically. So from what I know about how they act, I would say that they all began to stare at Jane and act unusual around her. And when she tried to report this, they said, then you must have some sort of anxiety problem. You must be having some sort of paranoid issue. So you need to go see a psychiatrist, and then you have to go into early retirement. So my question is this: if you had a lady that came to work at your school system, and she had a pretty good career there for 6 years, and then she had a quote-unquote nervous breakdown, and she had to go into retirement, do you think it's a good idea for everybody in your little New Fairfield school system to then dress up in weird costumes like witches and little black pointy hats at your retirement ceremony? Do you think that may be a little way all the wonderful people in New Fairfield could really stick it into Jane after bothering her at the end of her 6-year-long employment at New Fairfield? Do you think that these people that look like this, or like to wear little pointy black witch hats, do you think that they may have done something to make her a little nervous right before she chose to go into early retirement? Just by looking at the faces of these people, in my personal opinion, they all look kind of crazy. So when I started working for the New Fairfield school system, first, somebody started to vandalize my car. And when I reported that to my boss, I quickly developed an allergic reaction. And these hives and boils began to appear all over my face, neck, back, arms, and legs. And then the management in New Fairfield decided to let that go on for as long as they possibly could. The only thing that they were missing when they all had their little meeting to decide that I wasn't working out there was their little witchcraft hats. That's the only thing Phil Ross, Dan Bowen, Steve Hagen, and Rob Kirsting were missing, was their little pointy witchcraft hats. So in conclusion, I want to bring up one person who played a very important key role in all of this, and that is my father, John K. Harwood Sr. So John K. Harwood Sr. is the guy that found this job in New Fairfield school system for Jane that ended her 30-year-long career in the education system. And after she had such a negative experience at that school system, that was the place that my father thought would be perfect for his son to go work at next. And as soon as he started working there, they began to vandalize his car. And then he broke out in this terrible rash where these hives and boils covered his whole body. And nobody would do anything about it. So about a year or two later, my father and I are talking. And he says to me, that condominium that you're in must be getting kind of small now that your two daughters have been born. Why don't you start looking to buy a house? And I said, why? Do you know of one in the Waterbury area? And he says, no, but I think New Fairfield would be a nice place to live in. And he was 100% completely serious. And I said, are you joking? And he said, no, New Fairfield would be a great place to live. I said, do you think that's a good idea after my experience at the middle school? Do you think that's a good idea to enroll your two granddaughters into a school where they have men that put poisonous chemicals all over your son's equipment so that he breaks out with these terrible hives and boils until he leaves that place? Do you think that's a safe location to go send your two little baby granddaughters to next? Keeping in mind what happened to your wife when she went there, and then what happened to your son when he went there. You think that's a good idea to now send your two baby granddaughters over to that group of people next? And my father just shrugged his shoulders and said, I don't know. So this is the type of guy that they are looking for. This is the type of guy that will go along with everything that they do. It's something like a form of autism with these guys, where my father outwardly cannot make certain connections. And that is what they're looking for. People that go along with what the group want, almost as if they can't make decisions for themselves because they have mild mental retardation or autism. However, there is another side to them that is very cruel and very sadistic, that is prone to fits of jealousy and rage. And they'll do things that are very cruel. That's another side to them. So I have developed a diagnosis for them that I will begin to explain a little bit later. And I call that sado-autism. It's a mix of some sort of antisocial personality disorder mixed with autism, which is a mentally retarded form of schizophrenia. So that is something that my dad has. He doesn't switch personalities. You can't notice an outward switch of personalities, but there is a side to him where he is a very weak, stupid, naive guy that goes along with whatever they want. And the whole group of them call that ho. That is a code word in MK Ultra for people that go along with them. They call that their ho. As primitive or as stupid as that sounds, that is exactly the terminology that they use. So if people start to go along with them, those people are their ho. So the last thing that I want to add is that this whole group of them are chosen only if they are ho. My dad would not be one of them. Phil Ross would not be one of them. Dan Bowen would not be one of them. Steve Hagen would not be one of them. And Rob Kirsting would not be one of them unless all those men were hoes. They will never stand up for themselves. They will never stand up for their children. They will never stand up for their country. They will never stand on their own 2 feet and go against the herd of hoes. So I think that it is obnoxious that these people would call regular, hard-working Americans that want to do the right thing and stand up for others their hoes, because they are a cult of hoes. That is what the military is. That is what these secret societies are. That is what all their people are. So before I conclude this, I want to talk a little bit about Rob Kirsting. So Rob Kirsting was hired at the same time that I was. And Rob Kirsting went out of his way to act like he was a bit dumb. Rob said that his wife was a school teacher at the elementary school, and she's the one that heard that they were hiring for a custodian, and that is why he applied. And I think he said that he just had a kid. So when I tried to talk to Rob Kirsting to be social at work, he went out of his way to act dumb. And it was almost like a role that he was playing so that you would drop your defenses around him or wouldn't want to talk to him too much. So I tried to make conversation with him once, and I believe that it was in the teacher's cafeteria during one of our breaks. So I brought up movies one night to make conversation, and I asked him if he ever saw a certain movie. And he goes, "What do you mean, like monster movies?" And that was the accent that he used. And he said, "No, I don't like monster movies." And he just sat there with a big grin on his face. So this was a husband of a school teacher. And he was, I think, 5 or 10 years older than I was. So Rob Kirsting went out of his way to act kind of dumb. So from that point forward, I really did not try to start a conversation with Rob Kirsting anymore. And besides that, he would kind of sit there with Steve and do whatever Steve wanted him to do. So that was the example set. Rob would be Steve Hagen's idiotic slave who would do whatever Steve told him to do. So if Steve was a little bit irritated with me because I wanted to go make a phone call after we finished eating together, and Steve considered that a little rude, Rob Kirsting would also give me an attitude and consider that a little rude. So I thought, as this went on, that Rob Kirsting is the type of guy that gets along well with Steve Hagen. If guys like Steve Hagen are king, then the only people that truly get along with Steve Hagen are going to be guys like Rob Kirsting that go out of their way to act like idiots, unthinking, uncommunicative idiots that just do what they are told. So as this went on, all these things that went wrong, the damage to my car, people tampering with my car and putting chemicals on it, and people tampering with my cleaning supplies and cleaning solutions, I tried to be polite around Steve. I did not want to provoke any more hostilities between us. So I was cordial and always polite, and as my supervisor, I had to listen to what he said. But I definitely did not go out of my way to sit with him during our breaks or go out of my way to kiss his butt. So at the end of the 90-day probation term, it was Thanksgiving weekend, and Steve Hagen told us that he would not be there for Thanksgiving week. So he called in a custodial sub. So as second in command, when Steve was out for Thanksgiving week, Rob Kirsting took over Steve's part of the school and Steve's responsibilities. So the substitute custodian cleaned Rob's part of the school, and Rob cleaned Steve's part of the school. So Rob Kirsting approached me, and he looked very nervous, and he said, "We're going to have to pick up the slack for this guy who is new. So you're going to have to go up and vacuum part of my wing. But I want to make sure I know which vacuum you usually use." And he seemed nervous about it. So this was the vacuum that was giving me all the rashes on my back. And Rob Kirsting seemed very concerned that he may be using the wrong vacuum since everything got mixed up. So Rob Kirsting suddenly changed from being something like an airhead who did not say too much to walking over to me looking very conniving and concerned that he wouldn't use a vacuum that I usually used that gave me all these problems with the rashes and hives on my back. So that is Rob Kirsting, which is a personality type that I would suggest everyone watch out for in the future. Last, here is some video of the New Fairfield school system. It occurred to me during my employment there, with all these bad things that are happening to me, to bring the video camera in and videotape some of the stuff I would see there. Because after what happened to my stepmother Jane and what was currently happening to me, it did not look like the New Fairfield school system was being run by the best people. So they had a case, a glass case, right when you walked into the school. And they had all these photographs concerning death, disfigurements, disease. Here is an ad that says Jane is so cool, she could slam a 6-pack in an hour. And it shows her with a toe tag on. The next one says, "Mommy does, so baby does." And there is a picture of a baby holding a cigarette and a beer bottle. Here was an advertisement against chewing tobacco. And this guy's bottom lip is rotting off. Here's a poster that says, "Yesterday he took his midterms. Today he has taken his final exam. And he is dead on arrival," or DOA. So don't drink and drive. Next looks like a bird victim. And says, "If what happened on your inside was happening on your outside, will you still smoke?" And she looks like somebody who's been burned. The next is a poster against cocaine. And honestly, that looks like a dead guy. And it says nasal damage, heart attacks, pulmonary embolism, bacterial endocarditis. Next, there is an article from the local paper, "Found in Danbury. Trapped mosquitoes test positive for virus. West Nile virus found in Danbury." The next article, study. Parents in denial, despair as teens' drug use grows. The next article says Shaw's pulls tainted ground beef from stores. The next article, cancer therapies come at a cost. Cancer treatments carry many side effects. And underneath that, there is an article that says Army tests soldiers' brains as to help traumatic brain injury. Cervical cancer vaccine blocks virus. So this was probably something to do with an anti-drug month. But this was in a case, I believe, right next to the front entrance that greets everybody when they walk into the middle school. So I think this was 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So it seemed to be a lot of negative posters concerning death, all kind of grouped together. And then a bunch of these negative newspaper articles clipped out. Some that went along with addiction a little bit, but others not so much. So altogether it looked kind of negative in a display case to greet everybody who walked into the middle school. So what was kind of funny is that some kid did a poster, and this was put right next to that display case too. And it said stresses, and it was a poster divided into two columns. One said stresses and the other peace. And under stresses, the kid wrote school, family, friends, peer pressure, and death. And under peace, they wrote nature, music, and reading. So that kind of highlights a kid who's experiencing being taught in the New Fairfield Middle School. They're stressed out about death. I have no idea where they'll get some of those ideas from. And they're stating plainly that school gives them stress. Their friends at school give them stress. And even their family gives them stress. So this does not look like a happy person or a well-functioning student who's going to New Fairfield Middle School. But they've done this piece of artwork to expose their feelings about New Fairfield, and it's put up there next to their wall of anti-drugs, anti-alcohol, and death. So this is one of the classrooms that I was responsible for cleaning. I do not remember what grade it was. However, it was a science classroom. The teacher had all types of decorations all over the whole room, and also a bunch of plants. The one thing that stood out as looking pretty odd was a photograph of two people. There is a young man and a young woman, and they are sitting on what looks like sandbags. I do not know if those are supposed to be bags for concrete or for sand, but what is written on them is ARUY. So I looked that up, and supposedly, according to the internet, Aru means ouch in Filipino, or the Filipino language. And I guess that there is different ways to spell it, but ARUY means ouch. And there are some logos and things on the internet concerning that word. So I do not know why they would have a photograph of Aru printed on these bags of what look like sand or concrete. So they have dozens of these bags, and this man and this woman are sitting in front of them holding what looks like a chalice, a metal cup of some sort. So they're toasting each other in front of these bags of what look like concrete or sand with a "Ru" written on them. So the Philippines is a country composed of a group of islands right near Vietnam. So right next to that photograph of those two individuals, there is another photograph of a young boy holding a dog. I do not know what nationality that boy is, but quite possibly he may be Filipino. So to me, those photographs looked a little odd, and they were placed on the wall by the teacher's desk, kind of. So I could see photographs up of kids in your class or a teacher doing something, but that seemed a little odd to me. When I was cleaning the classroom, it caught my eye and it looked a little bit ominous. Two people sitting on sandbags or bags of concrete, holding up metal chalices or metal cups. So when I looked that up and saw that "Ru" was not the name of a concrete company, that seemed even more out of place. So I don't know if they're going to say this is some sort of inside joke and they have some reason to have something like this on their wall. However, it does look out of place in a 6th or 7th grade science class. There was a short video clip that followed of a name tag, and I believe that it's for this classroom, but I am not sure. And it says Mr. J, and there's a picture of a dragon. So I believe that that was the teacher for this science classroom, but I am not 100% sure. So I don't want to kind of pick on everything, but I began to notice that they had a lot of books for the readers that were all about witchcraft. It just seemed a lot of books were on witchcraft. But I guess that became popular with the whole Harry Potter series. That's what kids were into reading. I guess that was kind of the best books for kids, or getting kids into reading. And so a lot of authors imitated that and came up with their own versions of Harry Potter and Dungeons and Dragons. So it is a challenge to get people to read, especially younger kids. So when I was in reading class, I got into Ray Bradbury. He had a book on short stories. Also Alfred Hitchcock. So these were all kind of crazy things to read too. But that's something that would spark the attention of a 13-year-old kid. So I don't want to pick on too much of that. I just know that there is a fascination on witchcraft, and that all leads to a very bad place. But I do not want to overdo a discussion on that. What I do want to focus my attention on right now is to expose a book that was part of their curriculum for them all to read. I guess these books were put on the shelf if the kids wanted to read during the summer or during their free time. But a book called The Giver was assigned for them to read and study as part of the class. And that is one of the most negative books and negative movies that I've ever seen. It is very depressing, and it has some very negative subliminal messages at the end. They're not going to come right out and tell you, but it seems at the end, the hero, which is a young teenage boy and a little baby kid that he's rescued, have to run out of their evil city to escape a society and a government of serial killers, roboticized serial killers that practice eugenics, where everybody has exactly no rights and everything is assigned to them. Everything they are and everything they do is assigned to them. And the society is run by a class of roboticized and sadistic people that practice eugenics. So they don't like this one baby because the baby isn't reacting well to a serial killer type father. So the baby is labeled to be killed by that society. But the baby does like one person, and that is the main character. This teenage boy that is very intelligent and very optimistic. And so he comes across as being a great older brother. So right before the baby is about to be killed, the 15 or 16-year-old kid takes the baby and he has to escape the city. And it's snowing out. And so he gets on a sled and he's going down a sharp hill to escape the city limits. So as everybody may know, that's a recipe to freeze to death, to take off on foot into the snow-covered woods without any supplies. You are going to freeze or starve to death. But as luck would have it, he comes to a cabin. He comes to a house out in the woods. And they are all singing Christmas carols inside. So any adult reading this would say that's a subliminal ending, for the kid leaves the city with the little baby and he dies, but he goes to heaven. So it's very sad. So people may argue that's a way to expose that sort of society so that kids could realize that that is wrong and realize what they don't want to become. But it is also a hopeless message that says if you want to resist that, if you want to stand out and be different, if you want to be nice to little kids, then you have to run out of society, out into the woods, into the freezing snow to escape that. So it's a very negative ending with no hope. So that is exactly the type of book that would appeal to the New Fairfield school system staff to assign to the kids over there. And I believe that same book was assigned in Keene, New Hampshire to my daughter when she was in the 6th grade. Because the message is clear. If you go along with a sadistic and roboticized society run by a bunch of soulless lunatics, you'll have a place to stay. But if you rebel against that, you might as well just take a hike and disappear out into the woods and try to survive. And try to survive in the middle of the winter. So after I stopped working there, of course the rash and the hives went away, but my skin was still inflamed. This chemical that they were using on me did something to affect my skin, so it became very sensitive. So I ended up going to a naturopathic doctor, and they said, "What have they been prescribing you?" And I said, Benadryl and antihistamine medications. And they said, well, let's just give you a small dose of histamine. So that is a way to inoculate you, which means that they'll give you a little bit of the illness to see if your body will produce what it needs to do to fight off this inflammation or fight off the disease. So they prescribed me histamine at the naturopathic doctor instead of antihistamine, which is what the regular medical doctors were prescribing me that did not work. So they gave me a little bit of histamine and it cleared up my skin condition within a week. My skin was no longer inflamed or very sensitive to inflammation